Hello, and welcome to the How to Create a One-of-a-Kind Homeschool Course for Your Teen. I am Deshelle McVeigh. I am the owner of HideTheChocolate.com, where I share about our parenting and homeschooling journey with our Relaxed Charlotte Mason method. I am also the owner and publisher at Literary Adventures for Kids, where we give parents the tools they need to make literature inspiring and fun for their kids. And I am so glad you're here today. So if you haven't already, grab the workbook that was sent to you in your email, downloaded that, and we'll get started. So like I said, my name is Deshelle, and I'm the mom of 3 kids. I have one in college, one in high school, and one in middle school, and we've been doing this since way back in the 1st grade in elementary. I am a former high school teacher, so I have a little bit of experience of dealing with the high school crew and teaching that age group. Based on the fact that I run a literature curriculum company, you can guess that I'm a book addict. And based on the fact that I named my blog Hide the Chocolate, I'm a little bit of a chocolate junkie as well. So it's nice to meet you today. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what subject should you choose when creating a course. Then we're going to go into what is our end goal. Next, we'll talk about how long should this course be, what should we include in the course, and how will it be taught. And we'll finish up with grading. That's always the testy part, isn't it? How will it be graded? So let's get started. First, when deciding what subject we choose, we need to think first of our teenager. So start by simply asking them. Ask them what they want to study. So you need to realize that this is their education, not yours. They're the ones graduating from high school. They're the ones that are going to be looking for a new career. They're the ones that are looking for a job or whatever they're going to do. And well, you might be looking for a new career too, but this is their education. So we need to talk to them about what they actually want to learn. Let them take some ownership of their education. I know for a long time, if you've been homeschooling for a while, you're used to telling the kids what they need to take and what to do. But this is a time when you really need to take a step back and let them start making some of those decisions. Now, after we've asked them, we want to actually listen. So again, this is where it's hard on the parent who's been homeschooling for a while because we're used to doing this and we kind of know what they need. We've been there. We've been in high school. We had to make these decisions before. So we know what they need, but we need to actually listen to them as to what they want to do. If a subject is already fascinating to your student, then this interest will fuel their motivation so that they can complete their assignments and do the projects. So keep that in mind. You want to do things that are fun. I mean, when's the last time you sat down and said, I want to learn a new subject and I absolutely detested it and I'm going to do it anyway? Okay, I know sometimes we have to do that, but in general, as adults, we choose things that we want to do. We like to do those things. And when we're interested and engaged, we learn things so much easier. And it's the same with our kids. So if you give them something that excites them and it's already interesting to them, they'll be much more likely to do a really good job at that. Okay, our last step here is to research. Now, this is a collaborative effort because they need to know what they need for the future. Now, you may have a 9th grader who has no clue what they want to do for a living. That's fine. I didn't in college even. And in fact, what I went to college for is not what I do now. But that's okay because we change our minds and things change us. What you want to know is what kind of interest are they in and what kind of field might they want to go into? Will this help them and will this provide more for their future career? It doesn't have to. It can be an elective. It can be fun. But if it is something that's going to be some required course, you might want to look into that. All right, so that's our first step. What subject should we choose? Our next step is what is the end goal we have in mind? So depending on your end goal, changes how you're going to make this course. So if we start off with your kid is going to college. Now, again, we're not always sure things may change, but in general, you know if your child is interested in going into a career that's going to require college. If that's the case, you're going to want to talk to the colleges, find out things that they require. This is slightly different than graduating in your state this is what does the college actually require for admissions, or what do they suggest that the student that wants to go into this field has. Or maybe they're going into a technical school. Same thing. You want to call that technical school and find out what types of courses that they would like to see for this student to get in. But they may be going into a family business or some other type of venture, and that's fine too. You need to take that and decide what would be helpful to them in their future career and their future choices. So if you have a kid that really, really loves science and they hate history, well, you don't have to spend a lot of time on history. Vice versa, the same thing. I have a student who loves science and she really doesn't care for math. So we've done the minimum that she needs for math, and the science, she's taken tons of courses because she loves it and she enjoys it. So what were the courses that they need to help them reach their goal? And that's what you want to look at in this specific part about their end goal. Now, about the end goal, we also want to talk about what are your state's requirements to graduate. And this is important because I can't tell you what you need to have your student have to graduate because I'm not in your state. This is actually the list of my state's requirements on the screen. That may not be what yours is, but you need to figure that out, and you can do that simply by Googling it. Going to the state's website. Also, H2SLDA is a good source. There's several sources that you can look at to find, but always make sure and go back to your state's actual website because those things do change as laws get passed. So you want to look at what are the specifics of the requirement. And when I say that, because you may have requirements that are simply 4 credits in language arts. If that's the case, then you could really do so many different things in there. You could have a course that's completely on poetry. You could have a course that's completely Shakespeare. You could have an American literature, a British literature, a world literature, classics, modern. You could really take that and run wild with it. You could simply have a mix, and every month they change up a different book and they have a different thing that they're studying. But if your state is specific or your umbrella school is specific, then you may have to do a year of American Lit, or you may have to do a year of British Lit, or something along those lines. So you need to confirm how specific are these requirements that you have to fulfill. Next, think about, can you combine subjects? So there's all sorts of ways we can combine subjects. Say your kid is really into medicine. They want to be a doctor, or they want to be a nurse, or something along those lines. Well, maybe you can do a history of medicine. Get a half a credit for history, half a credit for science. Or perhaps your kid loves art, and you could do what my daughter did actually, which was the art in the medieval period. So she got half for history, half for art. You can mix and match things like that so you can combine some subjects and get credits in both things. And then there's how do you split up the subjects? So you may have history, and your school, umbrella school, is not very specific, or your state's not very specific. And so they just say you need 3 years of history. Well, do you want to do American history, Canadian history, world history? Or do you want to split it? Ancient history? Do you want to do the modern era history? How do you want to split that up? And you can kind of think of fun ways to do that. Like I said, your kid may be really into the Roman period. And so you want to do some ancient Rome history there. And that's great. That's fine. That works. Whatever is exciting to them. You might even split it up by topics. So just think about those type of things when you're coming up with a course. What would be most interesting to your child and would also fit into what the requirements that your state has. So the next step we want to look at is how long should this course be? So most courses are going to be a semester or a year. Now, how you define that is up to some discussion. And you need to also, again, look at your state requirements or your umbrella requirements to see if they have specific requirements there. But in general, when you look at how, say, a traditional school works, they'll have a textbook. And then when that textbook is completed, that would be the end of that course. Or it might be a specific amount of days. So in our state, 180 days is required for a year. So if my child studies for 180 days in the subject, then that would be a year. You might also do it by hours. So you might have 150 hours instead of 180 days. We're looking at like a 50-minute class period there. Or You may look at it as months. So like with us, we create in Literary Adventures for Kids, we create book clubs that are on a month basis. So you could have 8 to 10 different novels, and you could take those in a month at a time. And approximately 8 to 10 months is a year, because you got to figure in all sorts of holidays and things like that. So you can do it any way you want to, but pick a way you're going to decide how to judge the course length and go with that. Now, if you want to look at a semester, then just half everything in the year. If you want to look at a quarter, just half everything in the semester. And of course, there are some courses that have to be multiple years. For example, in our state, we have a requirement for 2 years of foreign language. So we would need to do the same foreign language, so Spanish 1, Spanish 2. It doesn't have to be specifically Spanish 1, Spanish 2, but a Spanish and advanced Spanish, or you could just keep working in Spanish and take up another year worth of time. But you can't flip-flop generally from Spanish to French or German or something like that. So decide how long this course should be or how much you need. So if you only need a half a credit for this, then make it a semester. So next we want to decide, what should the course include? So I like to start every course with a spine. And what I mean by that is just kind of a general flow outline of what we're doing. And it's really easy to do that if you pick a book. So, for example, my daughter wanted to learn psychology. I went into OpenStax, which is a fabulous free resource for college textbooks. We pulled a psychology book there. I started putting things together with it, and that is our spine there. For what we do with language arts and literary adventures for kids is we take books. So for our American literature series, these would be all classics, American books. And those books we follow through as being our spine. Each book is a different one. So you can take books, novels, biographies. You can take a technical manual. If your child's really into coding or something like that, you could take a technical manual and follow the outline of that. But something that's giving you some sort of a follow. Interestingly, this fall, we had plans, and it may be moving to spring depending on the world, but we had plans to follow a trip as our world history. So we were going to go to Europe. So when we go to Europe, we have different countries that we're going to visit, and we'll be following that with our world history. We're taking books and videos and things to put that together to become our world history course. It's really going to follow a trip. Now, after you got your spine figured out, you want to figure out what to put in with it. So this is great. This is when you can go on field trips, especially with history or science or even art. You can go to the museum. You can go to a science museum. You can go to on a field trip to a historical site, all these things that you can add in that really bring that learning home. You can also watch movies, and they don't have to be necessarily documentaries, just movies. Fictional movies will help instill something that's going on in that time period or what you were talking about as well. Fictional books go really along with that. In Literary Adventures for Kids, we spend a lot of time learning true historical facts from a historical book that's fiction. We also learn some science and math and things from a fictional book. So it's easy to pull in add-ins. Another one I love is to go to YouTube and find some great videos from good, reliable sources like Crash Course or other sources that you can verify, telling pretty much legitimate things there. So that's what you want to include in your course. Okay, next we have to decide, how will this course be taught? Now, you're probably used to a parent-led type of study if you've been homeschooling for any time at all. In a parent-led study, that's where we want to look at a parent being a facilitator more than a teacher. So when I say that, I mean more of, you're not teaching, you're not lecturing, you're not a lecturer. You're not going to sit there for 45 minutes each day and lecture to your child and then give them homework. No, you're leading them. In other words, you're facilitating. You're getting them the books and helping them define what comes next and sort that out and giving them the general outline. That's a parent-led. In that case, I usually create a course, and you can use in your calendar. We like to use Homeschool Tracker, but I just put in the things that come in, like our history course. Hey, you're going to read this book, then you're going to watch this video that goes along with that, then you're going to read another book, that kind of thing. That's what we say parent-led. In an independent study, that's where the student takes over. So they may be following the textbook and they're coming to you just when they need help, or they're following a general outline that you're not really giving a lot of guidance to. They're kind of coming up with it on. And this is great. We really need to be teaching our children to be independent studiers in this age, because when they go off to college or technical school or just on their own, they're going to have to learn to study on their own and not be spoon-fed the materials. So this is a great way to get them moving and just a little bit closer to that adulthood independence. Lastly, you could be part of a co-op or group study. So in our homeschool community, we have a enrichment classes group where we meet once a month. So that is one of the ways we instill science, like we might meet for labs, like a biology or chemistry lab, or we might meet for a book club that's kind of talking about the writing, some writing projects and doing some things like that that involve the book that we read. So you might have this is where it's mostly independent study, but also has an aspect of a group study as well. Really, it doesn't matter as long as you know what type of course it's going to be and your student is aware of it as well, so that you can both prepare and know what's expected of both of you. Okay, lastly, and this is really the tough part, how will it be graded? So I'm just not a big fan of exams. And I say that coming from teaching high school, and I taught math in high school for years too. But in teaching high school, I realized that exams are not a true indication always of how a student does in their subject. Sometimes it can be, but most of the time it's not. And a lot of times we have kids that when they look at an exam, they'll get that test anxiety and they don't do as well as they would if it hadn't been in a testing environment. So think of how you want to grade this. Could it be completion of tasks? So they're to read these books. And I always say after a book, have some form of narration. That can be they're telling you about the book. That can be you have them just write a short summary of the book, something along those lines. Discussion questions are great. I'm not big on comprehension questions, but discussion questions. So open-ended questions about the book that can be answered with not necessarily a right or wrong answer, more of a what they feel about what they read. Again, you can do exams, and sometimes like with a math class, it's kind of sometimes the only way you can really tell if somebody knows how to do the math problem is an exam. A research paper is fabulous. Research paper, some kind of final presentation, those two things are great ways to really see what your child has learned. So if they spent the last semester learning about ancient Egypt, give them the freedom to either write a paper about it or come up with a project so where they can share with you or other family members what they learned and how this course was, okay? Now you can always take a combination of these things, an occasional test, an occasional completing certain tasks, an occasional paper or type of narration thing, or a final presentation. You can combine these all together to be graded. What I think is important is when we're grading, we need to remember, did our students master what they were supposed to be learning? So we don't want to fail our kid, obviously, and I doubt many of us homeschoolers give a whole lot of failing grades because our goal is to educate. So if our student didn't understand something or they didn't get it or the concept was missed, then we want to stop and we want to go over that concept again. We want to keep going on this until we learn it and then we move forward. If your student has studied this and they have mastered the course and they can tell you quite a bit about this, that doesn't mean they can tell you every year, every time something happened in ancient Egypt. But if they can give you a general overview that is pretty masterful, then I would give them an A. If you see that your student is not wanting to do the work and they're refusing to do their work, even when you say, hey, we need to get this course under our belt so we can move on, then that's when you want to look at giving a grade that may not be an A. But in general, we want to make sure our student masters the subject. All right, lastly, here's some final tips. Make sure when you're working on this course that you're helping your student to become an independent learner, an independent thinker. And that basically in high school means you're giving up some of your freedom. You're giving up some of the control as a parent. And that is really one of the most difficult things I've ever done as a parent, is to give up control and let your children succeed or fail on their own. But that is an important thing we need to do as parents, not just in getting them to graduate from high school, but getting them to survive on their own when they're out there in the world. My oldest is 22. He's finished up college. He's living on his own. And it's always surprising to me what I forgot to teach him. And it's just those things where I did it myself, so I never thought about he needs to know how to do this so he can go on in life and succeed without me being there, without me helping him. So you need to help your children to become independent learners, and letting them help you choose a course and define the parameters of it is a great way for them to become independent learners. Another thing is to remember they're hormonal. So prepare yourself for the hormones. Stock up on the chocolate or the tea, or in my case, Coke Zero, whatever you need to get through the hormones, because there will be days when they will be wonderful and they will do everything you ask. And there will be days that you have to threaten their life to get them to finish their work. That's how it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. My kids can go from one extreme to the other. So make sure you have some kind of, mom group or a partner to share with in some way so that you can work through all those hormones, because you're not the only one out there dealing with this. Try not to micromanage. So this goes back to the independent learner and letting go of the control. If you get to micromanaging everything, did you read the specific page? You're going to drive them crazy and you're crazy. You need to let go of some of that and trust your children. If they say they read the book, then trust them. You can always discover that by asking questions, open-ended questions. What did you like about the book? You didn't like the book? Why not? What did you not like about the book? Which character was your favorite? And it's perfectly okay for them to hate the course. It's perfectly okay for them to hate any of the things they're doing. One of the things we do at Literary Adventures for Kids is I say, when I'm teaching this in my own homeschool or in our homeschool group, you can hate the book we pick. It's fine. Not everybody likes every genre, every author. That's perfectly fine. But you don't know you don't like that genre until you actually read that book. Or you don't know you're going to hate that author until you actually read something they wrote. So it's really important to let them feel like they have that ownership, that they can dislike something. They don't have to like that course. Like I said, I have a child who hates math. We're required to have a math every year in this state and with our homeschool umbrella. So it's not an option. She has to take a math. What we do have options on are what are the maths that she can take. So we can have a little more fun with it. It doesn't have to be something that she despises, and it doesn't have to be calculus. It can be, I do love calculus. It can be something that she finds more interesting. Teach them to set limits. And remember that your role is a facilitator. So these things are really important. Again, back to the independent learner. When you're teaching to set their own limits, you're letting them decide, okay, do I have to go to bed at 10 o'clock so I can get up at 6 a.m.? These are things they have to decide. I have a certain alarm of what time I get up in the morning because that's the time that I feel good. But I'm a night owl. So there are some times that I'm working to 2 in the morning and I'm not getting up at 7 a.m. I have a daughter who would sleep all day until she decided she wanted to take a science course at our local school. And when she did that, she had to get up each morning at 7 a.m. That was something, the decision she made, and she has to set her limits. I don't wake her up in the morning. I don't set her alarm for her. She has to learn this is what she wanted to do, so she has to learn to set her own limits. So if they want to play video games till 3 in the morning, what's they going to do the next day when they have to work or they have to get their courses done? Sometimes learning consequences is easier when it's natural consequences. I'm going to say this about teens in general. Don't force the socialization. So I know you want to get them in a classroom and force them to meet 16 other people who are wanting to learn biology too. That's not always the best thing. So if your child is really anxious about that, yes, you want to get them to where they can become less anxious around other people, but don't force them into a situation that is going to cause you a problem. So if there is a group lab that's a biology lab and you want them to go to it, if they don't want to do it, it's just going to make your life miserable. So don't force that. And lastly, realize education is all around you. It's not necessarily a textbook. It's not necessarily a workbook. It's not necessarily in the curriculum that's the best one lauded online. It is all around you. You can find education pretty much anywhere. We laugh because Last weekend was my daughter's birthday, and we had all these fun things planned. And one of the gentlemen whose children are not homeschooled came up to me. He started laughing. He said, "I love how you made this an educational thing." And I started thinking about it. We had talked about math. We had talked about history. We had talked about science. And I didn't mean to. They were all fun things to do. But I looked at my daughter and said, "I guess we get to count this as school today." So education is all around us. We can find fun ways to educate. Because personally, I don't want to learn something that's in a boring way. I want to learn something that's an interesting way, something that gets me excited about the project. And I'm sure you're the same way. So we shouldn't force our kids into you have to be forced to read this textbook and do this workbook. There's so many other ways to have fun with education. So I'm glad you could join me today in this replay. And if you have any questions, feel free to just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to answer them.